So I've got 3 packages. I already opened this one because, well, I guess I was thinking maybe I would consider, you know, because this envelope should tell you that it's a limited run games Nintendo Switch release. And you know what, I'm going to dig into it just a little bit here. But this is a Blossom Tales: The Sleeping King, which I think is a Legend of Zelda inspired game. And I kind of wanted to try it because it looked neat, looked well received, wanted to give it a shot. Wanted to see other things that go in it. And because it's one that I might actually pick up and play, because I get the feeling that I guess time boxing isn't the right word, but it's kind of along the lines. It might not be a complete time sink like a lot of games, and has high chance of being the kind of gameplay I am interested in. There's my little cartridge there, and looks like we've got goodies there. Let's see, look at that. That's kind of some neat top-down perspective stuff. We've got the limited run games card, which of course I keep in here, and then this. I noticed it. I didn't know limited run Club of Fun News. Feels like there's more to it, but well, this looks kind of like a poster. It isn't. I don't know what to make of what I just looked at. All I know is I've got these, and if I think about it, one of these is not anime. It's anime related, but it is in and of itself not anime. I was thinking it might be the top one, but I lost track of which is where. Look, that's anime. So it obviously wasn't the top one. That was not the anime. It was the bottom one here, which is not anime, but anime related. See, it's Attack on Titan Volume 30. Which I think I don't have. Yeah, that pile of unread stuff goes up to 29. Probably shouldn't look too closely into it, because, you know, spoiler stuff in there. I thought there were 2 anime. Cinderella 9. I'm just trying to think if that parka looks familiar. Nothing else about these characters does. Okay. Baseball. Cinderella 9. Princess 9. So, yeah, 9 players on the baseball team. So, didn't we have another baseball anime that kind of came out recently? Interesting. So, looking, I see a region A there. I see Japanese with English subtitles. So this is, you know, I guess. Hold on, I was looking for the special features. I guess this is maybe not the. It's all 12 episodes on 2 discs. Yeah, this is probably not the big name anime release week. But, you know, we still have something. And a couple of other things. So it's small, but that's this week's anime DVD collection update. Let's see. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of interesting things to talk about. So let's start with the Helpful Fox Senko-san. It's interesting because it kind of... I don't think fetishist is the right word, but I think it's kind of fan servicey, but not in the showing skimpy or lewd parts of ladies concept. It's more... It strikes me as the kind of thing where it's like... You feel like... You've probably got a lot of guys out there who feel overworked, wish they were appreciated for it, and there's a couple different ways that appreciation can show up, and one of those is appreciation from work in your community, but another one is kind of appreciation at home for,
you know, somebody's like, yeah, you're keeping things here running, and I really appreciate the fact you do that. I think this is something that society actually really does tend to take for granted. But, you know, putting that aside, this one seems to be more aimed for people like that and giving them something to watch. So, like, the titular character Senko-san is not a... She is a character out of time, but she's not a childish character out of time per se. So, like, you'll have plenty of characters who are young looking and are actually young or not, and pretending they know everything, but because they come from olden times, spirit world, whatever, they're not quite as capable of doing things. And Senko-san definitely has some trouble with some stuff, but she, for the most part, represents more of a strange combination of kind of a wife and a mother, I guess, and she actually refers to herself that way, and the character plays off that way, where a lot of her old-timey stuff is more like if you had an old person that wasn't familiar with this stuff but was still kind of young, so they do eventually have the ability to adapt to it, for example. But, you know, also throw in that she's a fox and you have some reactions with, like, the vacuum cleaner, for example. For the most part, though, she exists in order for the main character to kind of feel soothed and relaxed and pampered, I guess is the word that they like to use here. Now, where it gets weird, fan servicey, or maybe fetishy, I'm not sure. Beyond that, there's also this obsession with, well, as the English dub kept calling it, floof, where he liked to floof her tail, and she was always kind of nervous about it. And it's interesting because, well, I kind of agree that the floofiness of a fox's tail is a fascinating thing. There's a part of me that would think that even if I was just dealing with a pet fox, I would want to be interacting with it. The tail floofiness would not be something that I would be obsessed with. And they make this guy obsessed with that. And whether or not that is perverse is definitely kept very not completely defined. Like, they don't make it out to be absolutely sexual. In fact, they kind of use it to counteract the ideas of sexuality for characters that kind of expect it to be there. But instead, it's supposed to portray an innocence, but an innocence that these fox deities are a little uncomfortable with, I guess. It's weird. It's weird. There isn't really much of a story to speak of. There's kind of this vague notion of a goal, but it's more, oh, this time she's cooking for him, this time she's doing this for him. It tends to be along those lines. I mean, I don't think that sums up every episode perfectly, but it gets pretty close to the general gist. And overall, it's kind of nice. I guess it's just, if there's any issue with it, it's just not really engaging, and there is a little conflict introduced in there, but not sure what all to think about it. There's a part of me that thinks that it's interesting watching this, and to kind of see there not be this understanding. And I think part of this is just, you know, there's probably this large cultural phenomenon of people feeling like they are unappreciated for their hard work. And I think in Japan this is much worse with the salaryman culture sort of thing over there. I lost my train of thought. This has not been a very keeping my brain in order sort of day. I was thinking something. Oh, man, and I'm not getting it back. Oh, yeah, it was that, where there's this idea there, and just like it's obsessive about the floofy tail, when I would just be like more about the head pats, even though it introduces a little bit of head pat stuff in there. And this is ignoring whether or not it was a humanoid fox girl or a just plain fox, you know. It's like, you know, as a cat person, you know, I'm used to patting the head. I like to pat the head. They love it when you pet the head, and that's really great. But it kind of ignores that there's also this satisfaction that comes from pampering other people, which I think he kind of sort of tried to do to some degrees in there, but there was resistance like that, as if she should only be the one doing it. And the anime kind of skirts very closely with this fake caring, I guess. I mean, it's not really fake. There's this idea where a lot of people are really well-intentioned, but whether or not you could say someone is good-natured doesn't necessarily mean that they go from moment to moment good-intentioned. It kind of means, I think, a step above that. It's where you can have somebody that thinks like, oh yeah, well, I intended the best of options here, but I just did what everybody else does to make the problem worse. You know, because they're looking out for themselves, and that's not necessarily something that you can condemn them for, but you can kind of understand that, you know, they're not thinking, okay, I'm going to take this hit so that other people who really need this sort of thing can do that. And there's probably different layers, different moments and stuff, and this kind of is sort of related to that because she's there to pamper him. I think the exact reasons are not nailed down, but the general ideas are in there, and for the most part she's well intentioned, but I also have to wonder if it's a little more self-serving than you would think, just because it's about her feeling good about making him feel good. I mean, it's not exactly that. They kind of make it about her being genuinely concerned, but it's like the two major things that are there are, first of all, if you're taking care of them and then you're gonna have to go away, and the show, you know, never actually says, yeah, she'll have to go away. So that's just this sort of thing that's, you know, she suddenly appeared, there's nothing saying she could suddenly disappear because the rules aren't established. And what happens if she's been taking care of him and she disappears? Maybe he just goes back to where he was. Maybe he feels worse for a little bit, but then gets back to normal. It's one of those things where it feels like she's in the moment trying to help him without really considering long term if it's going to help. And the show's not really about that, but it does introduce this slight sliver of artificialness to it, I guess. That's maybe the better word I've been looking for. I've been using the word fake because I can't brain correctly today, so I'm going with whatever comes close to things. Oh my god, I don't know what that one's going to be like. I forgot if I was going to even talk about it. But finishing this up, there was that aspect. And then, of course, the one I talked about where sometimes there's this misunderstanding that sometimes feeling really good and satisfied with yourself is being given the opportunity to pamper other people, to give other people little concessions, little help. Even if you're doing the majority of the work. I think, like, it didn't acknowledge this, it tried to shy away from it, but it still required him to be given certain opportunities. Anyways, I think I've scatterbrained about that a little bit for now. Let's go ahead and go on to the next thing, which is Sword Art Online Alicization. They said it once or twice in the show, and I don't remember. It was English dub. It might not even be the way it's supposed to be pronounced in Japanese. I should probably... Well, no, I won't be able to find those. I don't even think I have the energy to look for them. This show was a mixed bag. There are cool ideas in there, but there are also bonkers bad narrative choices. things which might not necessarily be opposite, but definitely feel... I guess part of the problem is I've been trying to think what I would want to talk about that would and would not be spoilerish. So one thing that's not spoilerish is there is a time jump in here. And I think that's worth mentioning because one of the things that I really liked about the first story arc of Sword Art Online was the time jumps. And this one has helped me understand why I like those and I did not like these. Or this. I don't remember how many there were. I lost time. So, in the first story arc of Sword Art Online, there are time jumps, and what's kind of nice about them is nothing important happens, but the events before, the events after, and the amount of time kind of gives you an impression of what life was like for those characters. And I think a really good quick example is the very first time jump between episodes 1 and 2, where episode 1 establishes the basic premise of Sword Art Online. These characters are stuck in Sword Art Online, blah 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 blah, and the second one jumps forward. A lot of people have died, other people are scrounging, they're getting close to locating the floor 1 boss, and you know, nobody that we knew died, so the fact that those people died is narratively unimportant. The fact that people have been living is something that, you know, I don't think the show necessarily tells us so much as we can kind of see just the way the characters act and are after the jump. And I think the most telling scene is actually Kirito's first interaction with Asuna, when they're eating that food and it's just like stale bread, but that's all they can get. They're kind of like poor, but they're not poor, they're just stuck in this VR world trying to survive, kind of poor. They don't have a good grasp of the rules, and one of the reasons that works is because you know, we see them eating it, but Kirito introduces this drop from a monster where you just add it to the bread and it actually tastes good. And just the way Asuna reacts to eating this first good piece of food in a long time, you know, speaks a lot about just kind of what that was like for them, and you get this huge sense of relief seeing them jump out of it. It works as a time skip because we don't really need to see the intricate details to appreciate the results of them coming out the other side of it. And there's a lot of moments in Sword Art Online, the first story arc, that are like that. Now obviously, past that point, there's been plenty of narrative problems with Sword Art Online, which is unfortunate because there's also a lot of good ideas, but that pretty much means that as the series goes, it gets more divisive, and Alicization is... Alicization. It's no different. So there's a big time skip that's introduced in there, and what happens at the other end of that is our main characters talk about, oh, these neat things happened while we were gone. And the first story arc of Sword Art Online didn't have this tendency to talk about, oh, you remember all these events that happened in between the last time everybody else saw us? It pretty much indicates that there's narratively important moments that happened during that time skip, and that they should have shown us that instead of skipping over them. And I can understand they need to skip over some stuff, but you can kind of identify why some of that stuff is problematic to skip over, because Kirito's here again, and I have something else to say about that later, I think. And he works really well in the first story arc just because even though he's seen as having plot armor, it's very thin and is kind of closer to, this is the story about the one interesting person that ended up in this situation. Like, they could have told the story about other people and maybe had a completely interesting different story. Maybe you could have had something like Goblin Slayer, where the hero that slayed the Demon Lord or something was not involved with our main characters at all. That's just somebody else. Because our main character only has one job, and that's slaying goblins. But, you know, the first story arc of Sword Art Online is a little more understandable. But after that, It's like, okay, why is this character continuing to be interesting? At that point, it is complete coincidence. Because a lot of the events within the first one set him up to be the most interesting character. He was somebody who beta tested. He was somebody who found out how to survive as a loner. He was somebody that triggered a condition in the game that would give him something special. And that something was actually given as an explanation for something that the antagonist actually wanted. So you can kind of say, okay, I can see the antagonist wants this, the chosen one thing, and he set it up to create one, basically. And of course, the standout person ended up becoming the chosen one. So Sword Art Online works, season arc 1 works because of that. But once you get past that point, okay, now we have to start accepting the fact that Kirito has impossible plot armor. He can do really awesome things, so the shows need to be about him doing awesome things. And this is why I thought the Gun Gale, Death Gun arc actually kind of began outright, because even though it is cheesy power fantasy stuff, it is still about new environments for this person to try his badassery out, and new people being impressed for reasons that we haven't seen impressed for yet. It works really well. It kind of works similar to at least the first season of One Punch Man, where okay, the entire premise is he can defeat anybody in one punch. That doesn't sound very exciting. And you watch the first episode and you're like, okay, well, if it's everything where he's just like bored and punching somebody once, it's not exciting. And obviously One Punch Man did other things to make that work out. But your biggest sense of yeah comes from Saitama doing a one punch. And a lot of that just comes from, giving us new things to wow about, giving people in the world new things to wow about. I think there's a place where, okay, someone is powerful. It's really neat when new people get to discover this awesome character that we're like, yeah, I've been enjoying watching him too. There's a real camaraderie you feel for those people that's like, and isn't your life better for that? I think My Life Reincarnated as Slime is like almost all about that, and that's what I think really draws me into that. I'm trying to remember if it was completely that by the end. I think when they started introducing Demon Lords, it started becoming shakier on those grounds. So, man, I am really rambling off. The entire idea here is, if you've created a character who is overpowered, then one of the things that audiences want to see, who continue to watch it, is they want to see when they get to impress new people with their powers, when they get to impress old people with new powers, things like that. And this time skip pretty much is about some of that stuff, except they're like, but somehow we managed to withhold it until sometime after this one you see, and it's jarring. It feels like it did not jump from the right spot to the right spot. It took us away from some of the interesting information or interesting events narratively, for lack of better words for a power fantasy sort of show. This one's kind of crazy in that regard. But, that's the kind of level of, I don't know that sloppiness is the right word. I think reckless haphazardness would probably be a much more apt description of everything I think this show does, where there's things that it does because it says, okay, I need to do this, but whether or not it should do this, it doesn't know. But it doesn't even do it like it knows. It just does it like it doesn't care whether or not that was supposed to happen. It's just like, yeah. So it occurred to me that the thing I wanted to talk about first was actually about how this anime kind of fails the 3-episode rule. So if you're unfamiliar with this, the general idea is, if you're on the fence about an anime, it's generally considered good practice in the community to give it 3 episodes to find out whether or not you're going to be interested in it. This is because an anime can do a lot of setting up and changing into what kind of series it's going to be within those first 3 episodes. And I think Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann is a really damn good example of this, because you can enjoy the first episode But the build up to the third episode is completely different. And the third episode is what gives you a real inkling of what the series is going to be like long term. So for this one, I mean, it's almost kind of cheating because the first episode is a 40-minute episode, so it's a double length one. So it's almost like 4 episodes being evaluated instead of 3. But the big problem is the tonality of all 3 episodes is kind of mixed and all around the board and doesn't feel like it's really flowing and developing to something. And in fact, the end of the 3rd episode ends with a cliffhanger that's like, well, why didn't y'all do something like this earlier? I don't understand. And having watched the whole series, I kind of understand, is because that was supposed to introduce some narrative ideas that weren't supposed to be the focus of the series, but instead, you know, they introduced it after 3 episodes to give us something that was actually interesting and decent, but the interesting and decent stuff wouldn't happen until the 4th episode. So when the 3rd episode ends with a teaser, it doesn't feel like they're getting to the point quick enough, or that they're telling you what kind of story you're going to listen. I mean, after 3 episodes, I was scratching my head saying, I'm not really sure what this is going to be, because the first episode was this bonkers crazy one where it felt like, oh, here's some story, and somehow Kirito's inserted into it. And that's explained poorly. We have to take a large grain of salt to go with their explanations, because their ideas are interesting, but woefully incomplete and inadequate to explain things. There's ideas presented, but anyways, episode 3 is where it gets a little Goblin Slayery. And I've been told that this show is brutal, or had some brutalness to it. And that's an interesting concept, because it floats anywhere between, oh, that's good, to that's kind of absurd. So it gets a little Goblin Slayery, where it's like, oh, they're goblins, and they're pretty evil looking, and they look like something, I think, out of Goblin Slayer or something. They looked familiar. But then when they were actually moving and animating, they were not moving anything like Goblin Slayer, and it wasn't the one-sidedness, but it was definitely, they're not so great things, or something like that. And one of the things that made that work, and this is, you know, episode 4, so it's past that 3-episode limit, is seeing the actual confrontation with them, and that actually did some good stuff to define things that would be positive about the series. Which includes the brutality, but the important thing to note about that is it works really well for episode 4, because Kirito has been in VR games, and even when he was in Sword Art Online, and the death there meant death in real life, which I was going to say they didn't really introduce later, but they did with some death guns sort of stuff. But if you put that aside, they did some of that stuff. Oh, sorry, I just lost track of thought again. Basically, this scenario causes Kirito to fight like he would in VR, except when he takes damage, it causes real pain, which is a new experience for him, which is expressed very well and works very well for the 4th episode. And it's a really good example of the brutality of this series being used effectively. The main issue comes after all this stuff. Things, sometimes it works, but sometimes you're like, okay, so how many gallons of blood has this person coughed up now from receiving fatal injuries? Like, characters, the show does not like characters to die without an appropriate Sword Art Online pausing events. Like, you know the joke about how when the hero is transforming, the bad guys aren't allowed to attack, and you'll have some shows which deliberately, you know, have them attack, so it's like, haha, I've made it where you couldn't merge into the giant super robot. This show had a lot of those where people were just talking, and the person at the other end wasn't doing anything, and you could kind of sense that they would do that, but not every single time it happened. And the show was just kind of, it got a little obsessed with having the brutality to the point of sometimes it worked, sometimes it was just silly. Let's see. There were little narrative reveals that were just like, oh, yeah, we kind of knew this character was that character all along. It was really fucking obvious because not only did you set it up, but you went out of your way to, make sure we wouldn't see that character was the character that they were claiming to be. And, oh, yeah, it turned out, yeah, it was the character we thought it was all along. And the people in there were kind of surprised, but it doesn't work as well as like the thing I was talking about with the power fantasy person, people being wowed by that, because we don't have any reason for them to be surprised other than, oh, that's unexpected. Because the fact that somebody else was there instead of the person they were expecting has no, it doesn't do any, there's no, oh crap, we are fucking screwed now, well shit, we should have seen that coming. Instead it's more like, oh, I guess the jig is up. Why is the jig up? The jig didn't seem like it had to be up. It didn't seem like anybody had to be surprised by anything. It was... And then they're like, okay, well, I guess now that you're here, you're allowed to log online to update all the other friends, even though they don't do anything with that narratively, unless season 2, which, is a single core. This is 2 core, 24 episodes, and that one's 12 episodes. Unless there's something that 12 episode thing does that's just like, oh, now it's kind of relevant that characters were able to communicate in situations they shouldn't have been able to communicate. It's like they didn't use that. They seem to set it up and maybe it'll do something, but it seems weird that they would... It's narratively inconsistent with what's been set up. Likewise, they kind of mentioned that this underworld place, it was problematic that people in there would not be able to murder each other because of this taboo index. But you look at it and you're like, but this situation is set up for people to want to murder each other. And I think they established that this taboo index concept is burned into people, but they've encouraged a situation of such unfairness and injustice that even somebody other than our main characters should have been stepped up and done something. So the fact that they wanted to state there's no murder in there is weird because, the show introduces, hey, here's some noble people that are stuck so far up their own asses, they've come out the other end, gone even further up their own asses, and they think they're better than each other, and they mistreat people underneath them. I mean, they don't make it out like these are the only two people like that. They imply that there's a lot of other nobles like this as well, and that's the sort of thing where you're like, so people are going to want to murder even if it's against the rules. So you can't say that somebody's gone and created the perfect society, which they were trying to imply, but then at the same time it turned out to be some sort of Kino's Journey-esque artificial piece. It's like the narrative is messy, and some of it you can kind of construct to line up correctly, but then it's a presentation problem and it's strange. Especially since some of the problems they should have been able to fix on their own without any issue, but maybe they were intending for them to be fixed in a different way for a specific outcome, but of course this didn't reach that point with which to explore it. Which reminds me, the thing I was going to mention. So, one of the things about this, so maybe the creator, it's kind of hard to tell if the creator went into this saying, oh, I want to make this a story about somebody else, oh, but I better throw Kirito in there, Or if they wanted to make this a story about Kirito, but they're like, oh, but this is cool and this is cool and this is cool, like a very ADHD sort of assembly of cool ideas. I mean, look at the character there. The more I watched her, the more she seemed like not Saber, but Saber. I couldn't help but think that she kind of resembled character from Re:Zero. That one is a little bit of a stretch, but the point is, you know, there are things about this where I can't tell if they began by taking a story that wasn't about Kirito and they're like, oh, but let's put Kirito in there and make it in the Sword Art Online universe, and somehow that messed things up a little. Or if they're like, well, let's tell a story about Kirito, but oh, we keep focusing on him too much and people like other characters, so we're going to focus on these other characters, and then Kirito's just sort of there the whole time, being either the most important person or a good support background person, depending on what the story wanted to do. I don't know, there was some, maybe, I don't know if contrived is the right word. It felt like there was something very inconsistent there. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Other things I was thinking of talking about are kind of flowing out of brain. So overall, my opinion was it was watchable. There were things about it that were definitely neat, but it definitely also had its downsides. So I can't really say that anybody that would watch it would enjoy it. The mystery of everything that's going on is kind of tempting, but it kind of made me feel a little ill to push on. But because I had started it, I started watching it with my friend in particular, I wanted to keep on so that I'd be able to give a full opinion about it for y'all, and somehow I had the energy to do that, even though I kind of felt like I was pushing myself through it. But I wasn't pushing myself through it so much that I would pause in the middle of an episode and go take a nap and then come back and watch another 5 minutes and then pause and go eat something. Sometimes I have series that I'm kind of curious about, but I'm not being engaged enough to do that. So this one kind of kept me engaged, if not disgusted every once in a while from what I considered to be serious narrative flaws. Certain scenes dragging on a little longer where it's like, well, I don't know if I can even, like, I don't know if I've done a good job of not spoiling it enough as much as I would want to, but I don't know. If I didn't open up correctly, it's so mixed that I don't know. I couldn't really blame somebody for liking it because there are definitely really neat narrative elements in there. But at the same time, I couldn't blame somebody for absolutely hating it because, again, some of the storytelling it did was, I didn't like it. And so I was kind of stuck in that weird point where I liked some things about it. I kind of liked the design of all the characters I saw. I just thought the series kind of didn't utilize some of them all that well, possibly. I don't know. Okay, nothing else there because I talked about Code Geass last time. So, other stuff, Pokemon is the main other thing I've been doing, and what can I say? I've just I guess my goal going into the weekend and through the weekend was to complete the Pokédex in this game. Part of the motivation for that is I want to start soft resetting for another Dracovish, just because I want to put one in and I might actually go for a third one, just because, well, okay, the third one won't be anytime soon. But at some point it would be nice to have a Battle Tower team, a battle team, and then a lot of other Pokemon that are just useful for battle. And Dracovish, unfortunately, feels like it'd be nice to have options in all 3 of those slots. And the problem is when you register the teams, you can't use them in Dynamax Raid battles. I definitely want one for Dynamax Raid battles, which means that my current one is dedicated to Dynamax Raid battles, and he gets used for Battle Tower stuff because Dracovish is really good for getting through most of the Pokemon in the Battle Tower. He can usually take most fights on his own, and you just need to give him good support for that, like 20% of Pokemon that give him problems for one reason or another. But then that got me thinking, well, okay, if I'm gonna soft reset for another Dracovish, I would probably be tempted to do what I did last time, and that's just go for the right ability nature combo, and then I just have to EV train, level up, hyper train, all that stuff. But I was thinking, well, it'd be nice to have a shiny one because I've got so many shinies. And to increase the odds for that, there are a couple things you want to do. One of those is you want to complete the Pokédex to get the shiny charm, which greatly increases the chance. Maybe it was 3 times bigger chance. I don't know. The other one would be to accumulate more fought Dracovish on the Pokédex, which I think I've only been able to do when that one person shows up in the Pokemon tournament. Because the number's low enough that it definitely doesn't include any Dracovish allies I've gotten from Dynamax Raid battles, and I wouldn't expect that one. But I don't think it also includes the couple that I've encountered in the Battle Tower. Which means Battle Tower Pokemon probably don't count. I could probably find out by doing a run, seeing what my Charizard is at the beginning, because I'm guaranteed to encounter a Charizard if I do that. So I might be able to figure out that way, verify whether or not Battle Tower stuff counts, but I suspect they don't. Anyways, the point is, you get once you reach certain marks, if you've battled 50 of them, it greatly increases your chance of getting shiny, and more and more and more and more. So I kind of figure I might prepare to do that, and then I might just go for a shiny Dracovish, because I'm planning on creating one that's exactly like the one I have right now. So if I were to try to differentiate it, making a shiny one seems like it, but I don't want to soft reset until the end of time. Which not everybody does, but I am not that desperate of a shiny hunter. But if I can manipulate mechanics in my favor, I'm willing to give it a shot, and so I'm considering giving it a shot. That's why I went into the weekend with the plan of completing my Pokédex. And I've been hitting... So the way most of my Pokemon have been accumulated has been through Dynamax Raid battles. But I went ahead and caught up on stuff by leveling up and breeding stuff as necessary locally. And I caught a handful of Pokemon. And basically, as I went into the weekend, I worn myself down to 4 Pokemon. So Slurpuff was the one from my game. The problem there is, in order to make one of those yourself, you have to be able to trade Pokemon, trade back. There's people out there that would do that, but I don't want to try and depend on that sort of stuff too much. I'm not even quite sure how I would engage with people to do that. Probably go to certain Discords for doing that. But then at that point, I'd kind of rather just figure it out myself. Which I did on Sunday, but actually, it was Saturday night. Technically, it was Sunday because it was after midnight. But the other 3 Pokemon, Silvally, Zamazenta, and Ice-Q, are Pokemon Shield Pokemon. Now, Ice-Q you can get through the Dynamax Raid battles, but my experience has been that no matter what I do, I cannot get in there quick enough to get into an Ice-Q Dynamax Raid battle, because people are just so desperate to get those. Makes sense. It's a version unique. I can kind of appreciate that. It took me forever to get a Sojourner for the same reason, and I probably didn't even pronounce its name right. So, basically, I wanted to play through Pokemon Shield, because that's the only way for me to get a Zamazenta that I know is the way I want, and the reason I needed Silvally is because I kept my Type Null unevolved in order to use it as an early Battle Tower Pokemon, because you put Eviolite on that thing and it's pretty damn fucking beefy. It's a really good pivot Pokemon. Its real problem is it takes up a slot for which in the case of my Battle Tower team, I pretty much needed a special attacker because Ferrothorn was completely walling me. But, you know, for just starting out with the Battle Tower, Type Null, I really like the Eviolite Type Null because it's a Pokemon where you just roll your eyes and say, okay, I'm going to evolve this thing and make something that's at least halfway decent. Well, why evolve it when you can get something that's halfway decent unevolved? It's really well designed for it because it has most of the same stats as the unevolved. It's just slower, and that's actually in your advantage because as a pivot Pokemon, you kind of want it to take the damage and get something else in safer. Maybe have it deal a little damage of its own, and it's got enough stats that it hurts. But, you know, that left me in the situation where I needed to play through Pokemon Shield. So what I did was I did experimentation with Pokemon Home and verified I can transfer Pokemon between the games on my own Switch. So I caught a Rookidee and I started with a Sobble and I transferred them over to Pokemon Sword through Pokemon Home, where I gave them certain EVs, gave them specific moves, leveled them up to 100 and sent them back. And normally you can't command Pokemon that are traded there at that high level, but that, of course, the exception to that is when it's your own Pokemon. Basically, if your trainer ID is the same as the trainer ID of the Pokemon, this includes the hidden value. So the level 100 Inteleon and level 100 Corviknight always followed my orders, and I started around 12 noon on Saturday, and I actually got to the game fast enough where I was catching Zamazenta around midnight. Shortly after midnight, I actually got the Zamazenta that I wanted. I already had the Type Null of the type I wanted, and I had captured an Ice Cube. So then I was able to transfer them over, and then around 2 or 3 a.m. is when I finally initiated my own surplus Dynamax raid battle. I did the Wishing Star and Raid Den thing to get one from a specific den. And once I did that, I finally had the complete Pokédex. So I managed to do that over the weekend, and things are now a lot calmer. I don't need to hit the Dynamax raid battles as hard to get those rare, hard to get things. I can just battle and help people. I can breed stuff. But there is still an issue. You can't transfer items through Pokemon Home. If you have a Pokemon holding an item and you move it into Home, it gets automatically put in your bag. I kind of expected to do this because I think I've seen that before with maybe Pokemon Box, I think, for the was it Pokemon Box or was it my Pokemon Ranch? I don't remember which I've seen this before. Probably Pokemon Box. I've seen stuff like that before, so okay, I can't use this to transfer items. I've already figured out you couldn't use it to transfer eggs, so you can't transfer eggs over, have them hatch in the other game, so they have that game's trainer ID, bring them back over, and then just train those Pokemon up, and bam, there you go. You got the perfect team. But it turned out just the two of them were able to tackle absolutely everything on their own. The only real issue would have been trying to take on Zamazenta, but in that case, I just used the Master Ball because I was soft resetting from nature. I'm like, I don't have the time to figure out how I'm going to try and capture this guy, because these guys hit too hard. That might be an interesting idea to try to do, but I don't know if I could do that. Anyways, you could do it that way. Interesting ideas. So I still need to be able to trade Pokemon with myself to get the items out. And it would be nice to have access to the games because I could stand to go through Sword again and get myself another Zacian so that then I can go and get another Dracovish and then have two, just have Dracovishes for every single situation. And along those lines, I did sometime last week order a Nintendo Switch Lite from Amazon, but of course those are taking forever to ship. They're not really super in stock everywhere, so I think those are estimated to arrive on May 7th. That is estimated to arrive on May 7th. And part of me was thinking whether or not I wanted the Switch Lite, but I kind of figure, even though it would be nice to have two Switches because I could use them in multiple docks, a Switch Lite is nice just because it's interesting to compare the different hardware versions. And along those lines, I was kind of waiting to see if I was going to get a more powerful version of the Switch if that ever came out, or maybe just more refined hardware, but that hasn't happened, so it's all good. I'm probably not going to think too heavily about playing through this one. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, because the other one I'm just like, I've got too many experience items. You know what? I've been talking for a while. I didn't even remember to check if the camera had enough time on it for all this stuff. But, you know, that's all Pokemon stuff. At this point, I still have to get a certain item in order to complete the battle team I wanted to set up. I have other Pokemon I want to train up as other battle team options. I haven't even gotten a chance to see if certain Pokemon work in Dynamax raid battles, and some of them aren't really designed for raid battles. They're designed for competitive play, but placed in the raid battle thing because they happen to be shiny. These are things I have to figure out. But, I don't know. I think I've been rambling on for a long time. This will be a long video even though there's only one anime, right? I don't know whether or not to apologize for that. Y'all might like that. I don't know. Y'all keep hanging in there, you know, this social distancing stuff can't last forever. Even toilet paper is starting to get in stock again in grocery stores, so we'll be fine. We'll make it through. Y'all hang in there. Have a nice week.